There's a file in the hegemony's classified archives, designation sovereign null, that 9 different intelligence branches have tried to close, seal, redact, or simply pretend doesn't exist. It contains one subject, no rank listed, no unit designation, no homeworld coordinates beyond a single word that translates, roughly, into our tongue as the Muddy One. What it does contain is a timestamp log, 41 engagements, 14 planetary theaters, 3 separate occasions where our analysts marked her as confirmed dead, and then had to quietly update the file when she showed up again somewhere she absolutely should not have been able to reach. The last entry was filed by a tactical assessor named Vethorian, who spent 11 months embedded with a forward observation post watching her operate. His final report ran to 46 pages. His supervisor made him cut it to 4. The last line of the unedited version, the line that didn't make it through, read, "I don't think she knows we're afraid of her." I think that's worse. The file has no photograph. Not because they couldn't get one. Because every image came back the same. A girl sitting somewhere quiet, doing nothing remarkable. Reading, eating something, staring at a wall. The hegemony's finest pattern recognition systems found nothing threatening in any of them. The analysts who actually looked at them, really looked, stopped sleeping well. This is Vethorian's account. He asked us not to use his name. We used it anyway. He'd understand. Let me be clear about what I was assigned to do. Not hunt. Not engage. Not strategize. Watch. That was the whole brief. Watch the human rehabilitation compound on the moon they call Voron's Rest, a name that translates to something gentle and pastoral, which is a galaxy-class act of cognitive dissonance, given what it actually is, and log behavioral patterns. Document reintegration. Note any anomalies. Standard post-war intelligence work. The kind of assignment they give to officers who are technically competent but haven't distinguished themselves, which describes me with a precision that I find insulting and accurate in equal measure. So I set up my observation post in a decommissioned relay tower 3 kilometers from the compound's eastern fence. I brewed my nutrient paste, which is universally terrible and which I drink anyway because the ritual of hating it gives my morning structure. I calibrated my long-range optics. I began logging. Day 1, Day 7, Day 19. Nothing. I mean that in the most procedurally complete sense. The compound ran on schedule. Humans ate at prescribed intervals. They participated in their mandated education sessions. The hegemony had, in its infinite diplomatic wisdom, decided that reintegration meant sitting former soldiers through basic galactic civics courses, as if 3 months of lectures about trade tariffs would metabolize whatever it is that made them dangerous. And they completed their physical maintenance rotations, and they slept, and they woke, and they were, by every observable metric, unremarkable. I logged it. Every cycle. I brewed my paste. I watched. On day 22, I noticed her. Not because she did anything. That was precisely why I noticed her. The compound had 43 human subjects under observation. I had assigned them all catalog numbers, because using their names felt like a category error. You don't name things you're assessing, you number them. It keeps the distance clean. But I had also, entirely against protocol, and entirely out of boredom, started giving them secondary descriptors in my personal notes. Subject 7 was the loud one, a male human who had somehow convinced the compound's administration to let him run what he called informal language exchange sessions, which were, as far as I could tell, mostly just him loudly mispronouncing things in 3 languages while other humans tried not to laugh. Subject 19 was the one who argues with every meal. Female, perpetually dissatisfied with compound nutrition, had filed 4 separate written complaints about the protein allocation. Subject 31 was the one who fixed the broken water filtration unit on day 12 with what appeared to be a shoelace and several pieces of scrap metal, which is less a descriptor and more just what happened. Subject 28 was the uninteresting one. She sat in the back of every civics lecture. She ate. She did her physical rotations without complaint or distinction. She slept 8 hours. She read small physical books, which the hegemony had apparently decided to include in the compound's cultural resources, and which she worked through at a rate I found mildly surprising but not remarkable. She spoke to perhaps 4 or 5 of the other subjects regularly. She didn't argue. She didn't organize. She didn't do anything. On day 22, I was calibrating my optic array during the morning lecture session, and I almost didn't notice. She was sitting in the back row. Same seat she always chose, 3 rows from the wall, second from the left end, clear sightlines to both exits. The lecturer, a hegemony educational administrator named Fosteven, who I had decided was either entirely sincere or running some kind of long con, and couldn't determine which, was covering emergency communication protocols. What to do in the event of a hegemony station-wide alert. How to identify evacuation routes. Where to shelter. The other humans were paying variable amounts of attention. Subject 7 was drawing something. Subject 19 had her eyes closed but was probably not sleeping because her breathing pattern was wrong. Subject 31 was taking notes. Subject 28 was also taking notes. Except she wasn't writing what Fosteven was saying. I didn't realize this until I ran the optical enhancement back through the day's log at 1400x magnification, looking for something else entirely. And there, her notebook, in her own hand, she was mapping. Not the evacuation routes Fosteven was describing. The real ones. She had the compound's structural schematic partially reconstructed from observable information. Foot traffic patterns. Guard rotation timing, which she'd apparently been counting because the numbers in the margins matched the actual intervals to within seconds. Weight-bearing wall indicators, noted in a small symbol I didn't recognize at first until I cross-referenced, and realized it was a standard military load calculation mark. She was sitting in a civics lecture about trade tariffs, and quietly building an infiltration map of the facility she was being housed in. While looking, to all external observation, mildly bored. I held the image for a long time. Then, I brewed more nutrient paste. I didn't log it immediately, which is either a lapse in professional conduct or the first genuinely competent decision I'd made in 11 months. I'm still not sure which. I want to be precise about something, because I find precision comforting, and I need some comfort right now, looking back at these logs. She wasn't planning an escape. That's what I thought initially. That's the obvious read. Former soldier, captive setting, tactical mapping. She was looking for a way out. She wasn't. I know this because I watched her for the next 19 days with the specific focus that a professional really should have been applying all along, and she never moved toward any of the vulnerabilities she'd cataloged. She identified the weak point in the eastern sensor grid on day 28. She walked past it every morning on her physical rotation and never varied her path by so much as a half step. She noted the guard rotation gap in the northeastern quadrant. For minutes, 20 seconds, reliable as anything I've ever measured, in her log on day 31. Never used it. She was mapping the compound because she was constitutionally incapable of not mapping a compound she was living inside of. This is the part that kept me from sleeping on cycle 88.34. It wasn't a plan. It was a reflex. Like breathing. Like the way subject 19 automatically noted the caloric content of every meal, even when she wasn't complaining about it. The pattern recognition was running continuously, in the background, behind whatever other expression her face was making at the time. She sat in lectures about galactic trade agreements, and her hands drew defensive geometries. She wasn't a threat to the compound. She was someone for whom evaluating threats and options was simply the default state of consciousness. The compound was safe because she'd decided it was safe, or at least safe enough. If that calculation changed, the map was ready. I filed a report on day 33. I reported that subject 28 showed strong compliance behaviors, low social friction, and no observable indicators of disruption risk. All of this was technically true. Her name, I learned eventually, was a single syllable. Marin. One of the compound administrators used it once, calling across the yard, and something about how she moved when she heard it. Not turned, just registered. A small economic adjustment of her attention made me write it in the margin of my log. Not her catalog number. Her name. I don't know why I did that. I do know that I immediately felt I'd made a mistake of some kind, but I couldn't justify erasing it, so I left it. On day 41, subject 7, the loud one, got into a physical altercation with another subject over something trivial. It escalated faster than the compound's response team anticipated, because humans operate on a timeline between decision and action that consistently surprises hegemony personnel who haven't worked with them before. By the time the second alarm sounded, there were 6 humans involved and 2 compound staff down. I was watching from the tower. I watched Marin for the entire 47 seconds of the altercation. She didn't move from her seat by the eastern wall. She had a book in her hands. She watched. She watched the way I watched, cataloging, timing, noting. Her eyes moved to each figure in the yard with the specific economy of someone running a threat priority sort. She was reading the altercation the way I read my logs. Looking for information. At second 31, subject 19, the one who argued about meals, was about to be struck by one of the combatants who hadn't noticed her in the chaos. Marin put down her book. She crossed 11 meters in the time it took me to register she'd stood up. She did something with her left arm that I couldn't fully track at my angle, and the combatant sat down on the ground, hard, with the expression of someone who had been briefly introduced to physics in a personal and unwelcome way. Then, she picked subject 19 up by the elbow, moved her 3 meters to the left, and went back to her seat. She picked her book back up. The whole thing, start to finish, was 9 seconds. She didn't look around afterward. She didn't check if anyone had seen. She turned a page. I sat in the relay tower for a long time after that. My nutrient paste went cold. I didn't notice until I was already drinking it, which is worse than drinking it hot, because warm, terrible things are at least consistent. I stared at my observation window. I had 41 days of logs. 41 days of careful, thorough documentation of an entirely unremarkable subject who woke and ate and attended lectures and read and did nothing of consequence. 41 days of data that I was now understanding, exactly what she'd decided I would have. I pulled up the civilian records attached to her file. Standard intake documentation. Height, mass, prior occupation listed as auxiliary logistics, which is either exactly what it sounds like or one of the cleaner lies I've encountered in this work. There was a service commendation dated 3 years back, partially redacted. The visible portion cited, and, I'm quoting directly, outstanding contribution to mission integrity under conditions of extended adversarial encirclement. The rest was blacked out. I read auxiliary logistics again. Then, I made the mistake of cross-referencing the redaction code, which I had clearance for, which I probably should have done on day 1 instead of day 41. The code mapped to a conflict theater I recognized. Operation Relsoreth. The Corridor Campaign. 14 months of sustained engagement in a communications dead zone where hegemony forces had, tactically speaking, every advantage, and had still not managed to conclude the operation within 3 projected timelines. I knew someone who'd served there. He didn't talk about it. When I'd asked once, he'd made a face like I'd suggested something obscene and changed the subject. Auxiliary logistics. I looked at my window. The compound yard was quiet now. The altercation had been resolved. Medical was attending to the 2 staff members. Marin was reading. She was 3 rows from the wall, second from the left, and her book was open in her lap. And she looked like someone for whom sitting in a chair was the most natural thing in the world. I added 1 line to my personal log, not the official one. She knows exactly where every exit is. Then, I made more nutrient paste. It tasted the same. It always tastes the same. It started because someone above my clearance level made a decision that someone below my clearance level was asked to carry out. This is the standard anatomy of a disaster. The decision was this. Marin was to be transferred from the Vorin compound to a secondary assessment facility 7 systems away. The reason, and I only found this out afterward, pieced together from half conversations and documents I technically wasn't supposed to read, was that someone in the upper echelons of hegemony strategic affairs had noticed the redaction code in her file, had actually cross-referenced it on day 1 unlike me, and had decided she was too valuable to leave in a civics lecture. They wanted to evaluate her. Specifically, they wanted to understand what she'd done in the Relsoreth corridor that had required 14 months of cross-branch effort to partially undo. The word recruit appeared in 2 of the documents I found. So did the word asset. The transfer was arranged. Standard security escort. 3 vessels, staggered formation, the kind of operation that exists specifically to be so ordinary that nothing happens. Nothing happened for approximately 9 hours. Then, Marin was not where she was supposed to be. Not escaped. That's the wrong framing, and it matters. She was aboard one of the 3 escort vessels, exactly where she'd been placed. The vessel was where it was supposed to be. The seals were intact. The security personnel were present, accounted for, and entirely unharmed. She simply was not in the secured compartment anymore. She was in the operations bay, sitting at an inactive secondary console, apparently having been there for approximately 4 hours before anyone noticed. When the security lead asked her how she'd gotten there, she said she'd walked. The security lead, a hegemony veteran who had presumably encountered most things the galaxy had to offer, reportedly stood in the doorway for 11 seconds without speaking. She was walked back to her compartment. Additional security measures were applied. The incident was logged with a priority flag. 2 hours later, she was in the operations bay again. Different route. She hadn't touched anything. She wasn't armed. She wasn't doing anything except existing in a space she had been told not to exist in, with the mild expression of someone who has found a quiet spot to read and sees no reason to give it up. When asked, again, how she'd gotten there, she said she'd walked. Same answer. Different route. The transfer was halted at the nearest way station. A specialist team was requested. I was, and this is the part of the story where I should have, at minimum, asked more questions before agreeing, listed as the specialist. Because I had the most direct observation hours on her file. I packed a bag. I drank terrible nutrient paste on a shuttle for 6 hours. I arrived at Waystation NOSS and was immediately briefed by a security lead who had the specific posture of someone hoping I was going to explain that this was all very simple. I was not going to be able to explain that. Her compartment on the Waystation was standard secured accommodation, 2 locks, passive surveillance, reinforced environmental seals. Nothing exceptional by hegemony detention standards. I was given a chair outside it and told to assess. I sat in the chair. She sat inside the compartment. Through the surveillance feed, I could see her. She had a book, same small physical format she'd favored at the compound. She was reading. She ate when food was brought. She slept. She was entirely, comprehensively unremarkable. I drank my nutrient paste. On the second day, I asked to speak with her directly. This required 3 separate approvals and a consultation with someone who outranked me by so many tiers that the conversation felt like a geological event. But eventually the approvals came through, the consultation concluded, and I was shown into the compartment with a guard stationed outside the reinforced door. She looked up when I came in. "You're the one from the tower," she said. "I want to sit with that for a moment." 3 kilometers. Compound to tower distance. 11 months of observation. No direct contact, no exchanged communications, no reason she should have ever known I existed. "You're the one from the tower." "Yes," I said, because there wasn't anything else honest to say. She nodded, like this confirmed something, and went back to her book. "The paste you drink smells bad from a distance," she added, without looking up. "Even at 3 kilometers, if the wind is right." I thought about the 41 days of logs I'd filed. I thought about the word unremarkable. I sat down across from her. There was a second chair, small, utilitarian, and I said, "The transfer team found you in the operations bay twice." 3 times, she said. "They only noticed twice." She turned a page. We spoke for 2 hours, or rather, she answered the questions I could figure out how to ask, which is not the same thing. She wasn't hostile. That was the part that kept throwing me. Hostile would have been legible. Hostile has a grammar you can work with. She was courteous, even. She answered directly. She didn't deflect with silence. She gave me information. The information was just not always the information I'd been trying to get. I asked her why she'd mapped the Vorin compound. She said, "Because I was living there." I asked her what she would have done if she'd needed to use the map. She looked up at me then. Not a long look. 2 seconds, maybe 3. But with the quality of attention that a person gives when they're deciding whether the question is worth a full answer. "Used it," she said, and went back to her book. I asked her about Relsoreth. She was quiet for long enough that I thought she wasn't going to answer. Then, she said, "Which part?" "The part that's redacted." She almost smiled. Not quite. A small compression at one corner of her mouth that might have been something, or might have been nothing, and I'd learned by then that I wasn't going to be able to tell the difference. "Which part do you think got redacted?" she asked. I didn't have a good answer. I knew what the operation had been. I knew what the hegemony's projected outcomes had been. I knew they'd been wrong. Beyond that, the redaction code covered everything. "The part that made them want to recruit you," I said finally. She nodded, like this was a reasonable answer. "I found a way out," she said. "We were encircled. There wasn't supposed to be a way out." She paused. "I found one." That was all she said about it. The door was there for the conversation to end, and I could feel it, and I almost walked out, and then, because I am apparently incapable of making a clean exit, I asked her one more thing. "When you got to the operations bay on the escort vessel," I said, the 3rd time, that they didn't notice. "What were you doing?" She looked at me. "Reading the navigation system," she said. "Why?" She tilted her head a fraction. The almost smile again. "Because I was living there." I filed my official assessment report on cycle 89.11. It was 4 pages, per my supervisor's requirement. It cited behavioral indicators, risk tier categorization, and A set of containment recommendations that were thorough, professionally formatted, and represented my honest best effort at answering the question I'd been sent here to answer. The last item on my containment recommendations was, do not attempt to contain. My supervisor called me within the hour. Veth Orion, she said, this is not a recommendation. No, I said. It's the only accurate one. There was a long pause on the line. Explain. I looked at my notes. 41 days of logs from the compound. 2 days here. 2 hours of conversation. Everything I had. She's not trying to escape, I said. She's not hostile. She's not planning anything. She evaluates. Continuously. Every space she's in, every system she's inside. She is, perpetually, learning how it works and what the options are. You can't contain someone like that because the container becomes part of what she evaluates. Give her 3 days in any facility and she knows it better than the people who built it. Another pause. So what do you recommend? I thought about the tower, the cold nutrient paste, the 1400x magnification on a civics notebook, the way she'd crossed 11 meters in 9 seconds and gone back to reading afterward. Don't make her an enemy, I said. My supervisor said she would take it under advisement, which is administrative language for this conversation is over, and I'm going to do what I was already going to do. I stayed on the way station for 3 more days, finishing my documentation. On the morning of the 4th day, the transfer was rescheduled. A new team, different protocols. Before I left, I was allowed one more brief contact visit. Protocol, sign off on my assessment, confirm the subject's status. She was reading. Different book. They're moving you again, I said. Tomorrow. I know, she said. Different route. I know, she said again. She looked up at me, and this time it wasn't the 2-second assessment look. It was something else. Longer. More considered. You wrote my name in your log, she said. On day 22. I did not ask how she knew that. I thought about it. I didn't ask. Yes, I said. She nodded. Thank you, she said. Then, she went back to her book. I don't know what happened after. That's the honest answer. My assessment was filed, my involvement in the transfer concluded, and the file was passed up the chain to someone with clearance I'll never hold. I was reassigned. New compound, new subjects, a different moon with a different pastoral name that was probably also a lie. I brewed my nutrient paste. I calibrated my optics. I began logging. The Sovereign Null file got updated sometime in the following year. I know because the access timestamp showed activity, not because I could read the updates. Someone added new entries. How many, I don't know. What I know is this. She was in the Relsorth corridor for 14 months, encircled, and she found a way out that required 3 cross-branch operations and years of documentation to partially understand. She was in a secured compound for 41 days and built a complete operational map of it from a civics lecture. She was on a transfer vessel for 9 hours and was in the operations bay 3 times. She was in a way station detention room for 4 days and knew what I'd written in my log. I'm not drawing a conclusion. I'm done drawing conclusions about her. Every conclusion I've drawn has turned out to be the wrong resolution, like a door I opened expecting a room that contained something else. What I am noting, for my own records, the ones that don't go in any official file, is that the last thing she said to me wasn't an observation, or an assessment, or information. It was 2 words. Thank you for writing her name. That's the part one keep coming back to, on the mornings when the nutrient paste is cold, and the optics need calibrating, and the logs are empty. That's somewhere out there, in whatever file they've built around her, in whatever operation they've eventually determined she's suited for. There's a girl who sits quietly and evaluates everything. And noticed when someone chose to write her name instead of her number. I don't know what to do with that. I just keep logging.